Hello, I don't know about you, but I hate summer. I am surviving simply by staying indoors and reading. But as you'll see, maybe not reading as much as I usually do. So, after this quick intro, I'll be right back to talk about the books I read in June, the books I started in June that I'm still reading, and the other books I want to read in July. I'm Jen, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you are a returning subscriber. My channel is Horror Literati, and this is the space where horror enthusiast and deep dive analysis and academia merge. I am glad that you're here, and I am going to do my best to try to talk about the books that I did read, if I can remember what happened in those books, because I'm kind of in that phase of summer brain right now. So typically I will start with my least favorite book and move into my most favorite books of June. So we'll do it that way today. So I know this one is going to be upsetting for some people because a lot of people love this book. I actually talked about it on my mid-year freakout tag as the most disappointing read of the year so far, and that is North American Lake Monsters by Nathan Ballingrud. I was just very underwhelmed by the stories in this collection. I did know already from reading the synopsis that it was not going to be about, really not necessarily like these kinds of fictional monsters. A lot of the monsters in these stories are human monsters. So I did know that going in. But I just felt like a lot of the stories just ended and I was like, okay. I did like his writing style. Actually tabbed a few quotes that I found to be really well written and just very descriptive. And I talk about those in my mid-year freakout video, so I won't rehash them here, but I will link that video down below. But I was just disappointed and ended up giving this book 3 stars. So the next book I want to talk about was an audio book for me, and this is one I just picked up on a whim when I was looking through Libby because none of the books I wanted were available. So I said, let me see if there's anything else that possibly piques my interest, and that book is Aurora by David Koepp. And I actually liked this book. It was not perfect, and there were times I rolled my eyes at the characters and some of the plot twists or some of the things that felt a little too convenient. But nevertheless, I felt compelled to keep reading. So Aurora is about an electrical, like cosmic type event that shuts down electricity and water production and all of that kind of stuff for the span of, gosh, I think it was like a year and a half to 2 years maybe. It happens across the United States, and it's about really, you kind of have these dual points of view. You have a sibling, a sister who's middle class, and she's dealing with her piece of crap ex-husband who's trying to come over and act like he's going to do stuff to help during this power outage, but really what he wants is money. He's got a lot of problems. Whenever he divorced this main character, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten her name, his teenage son actually ended up staying with her. So she's trying to raise this 14-year-old stepson also while dealing with the piece of crap ex-husband and dealing with the lack of, there being no power. So you have that perspective, and then you have her brother, who is a billionaire tech guy. So he'd always planned for any sort of cataclysmic event, such as the one that takes place in this novel. So he's got this bunker and he's got his family, but he's had an affair, so his wife is upset with him. So you got all this drama going on. And as it turns out, his bunker is not as safe as what he thought it was. So you have a lot of your typical kind of apocalyptic event characters who are doing terrible things in order to survive. And then you also have those that work together. But I just really enjoyed listening to this audiobook, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. So the next book I want to talk about is Sacrificial Animals by Kaylee Peterson. And before I talk about it, I want to go ahead and say that I did end up giving this book 4 stars. Even though there were several times I thought about DNFing, the prose is very purple prose. It's very literary. Sometimes I honestly felt like Kaylee Peterson had gotten a thesaurus and was just looking for the most obsolete, elitist vocabulary possible. But I still found myself enjoying the multitude of similes and metaphors and other types of figurative language. And I was also compelled by the story. So this has dual timelines. You follow 2 brothers who grew up with an abusive father on a farm, and the older brother married a Chinese woman, and his father, the abuser, was racist, xenophobic, and so he actually disinherited that older brother for marrying someone who was Chinese. And by the way, I do want to say that the author is a Chinese American. Let me see. Yes, she was adopted from Nanning, China, and she grew up in Nebraska. So she is speaking from her own, some own voices story. So the younger brother, he was not as favored by his father as the older brother. But of course, once the older brother is disowned by his father, then the younger brother gets a little bit more of a prominent status. And the father calls the younger brother eventually, when they're all adults, and tells him that he's dying. And so the younger brother ends up calling the older brother because the father wants to reach out and reconcile with his son that he disinherited, and with his son's wife that he said horrible xenophobic things about to her face, and then also behind her back. So just be aware that there is xenophobic and racist language. Also, there is animal harm and cruelty and animal death at the beginning. It's very extreme. It was very difficult for me to read, so I actually had to put the book down for a minute about that. But it is integral to what happens in the story. So just be warned about that. So the siblings and the older brother's wife, they get back to the house. The older brother and his wife are willing to make amends. But I can't give details, but we find out that this wife is not simply who she seems to be at first. She may have certain motives or proclivities, and like I said, it is connected to something to the animal harm that happens at the beginning. So I know I've probably rambled about it, but it's one of those books that's kind of difficult to describe. But it just flows, even when I was like, oh, this is too much. But then other times I was like, no, that sentence is like beautiful. So I will read you a couple of examples so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. And that way you can maybe decide if this might be too much for you. As Kenny pulls the Studebaker into town, Nick sees the snow has already begun to fall fine and gentle as powdered sugar, dusting the roofs, shimmering and delicate. Empty are the streets on a Saturday afternoon, so cold it is nearly wounding, shearing the skin from his nose and his eyelids. The wind has torn the black wet bark from the trees, leaving them naked and defenseless. They pass the diner with its window iced over, and through it he can barely see the silhouettes of transients gathered for their hash browns and coffee. A single man standing outside smoking beneath the lamppost. That's something else that I was reminded of when I read that passage. There are quite a few what we English teachers would call run-on sentences and sentence fragments, but it is just the way that this author writes. I would also describe this as very stream of consciousness. So if you don't like that, you probably wouldn't like this. And then I'll read a couple more passages. He knows that his father judges him too girlish, too maudlin for the unremarkable acts of daily life, cutting wood, feeding the dogs, latching the gate around the coop. Nick senses he is destined for a life beyond Stagg's Crossing, a future that appears so far away he can hardly comprehend it. Yet he knows that no matter the distance between himself and Stagg's Crossing, 1,000 miles to match the 1,000 acres, some part of him will remain trapped here, looking up at his father from where he kneels at his feet, brought to heel at last. So something else that I'm reminded of there too, there is also homophobic language in this book. So again, be aware of that. But really this does ask the questions about, is a person in and of themselves bad? Or we find out that the father, his wife, the boy's mother, died when they were very young. He lost his wife. And to me anyway, it wasn't real clear as to whether he was this way before she died. I think I got the impression he was somewhat that abusive type, not necessarily physically, before she died, but then after she died, it really ramped up and he took out his anger and grief on his sons and others around him. So questions then about, why or how does someone become the way that they are? Questions for the sons, even though they both ended up leaving their father's home and farm. Were they ever really able to escape? Can you ever truly escape trauma? And what are the repercussions of horrible deeds that you commit, whether you're an adult or a child? There is a lot packed into sacrificial animals, but I did end up giving it 4 stars. Like I said, it's a heavy read, and some of the passages are challenging to get through, not only for the content but also for the way it's written. But I would encourage you to pick it up, give it a try, see if it works for you. So the next book that I finished in June is a non-fiction book, and this is In the Mouth of Madness from the Devil's Advocate series, and this is written by Michael Blythe. I also mentioned this in my mid-year freakout video because it is one of the books that I consider as making me happy so far this year, because I do love John Carpenter's Lovecraftian movie In the Mouth of Madness. So what Michael Blythe does in this book is to argue for the importance and the greatness of In the Mouth of Madness, and then he brings up several analytical points that he speaks about, and how the movie portrays each of those points. So we'll talk a little bit about what he wrote about. I love how he divided the chapters up into lines from the movie introduction. Maybe he's too sophisticated for you. Chapter 1 is just a matter of time. I won't read them all. Chapter 4, you can forget about Stephen King. Chapter 7, this one will drive you absolutely mad. So he talked about the film as postmodern and meta. He talked about the film's connections to the works not only of H.P. Lovecraft, but also Edgar Allan Poe and Stephen King. He talked about destruction through art. He brought up this really cool point because In the Mouth of Madness is in a trilogy of John Carpenter movies that John Carpenter labeled his apocalyptic trilogy. And so Michael Blythe pointed out that The Thing is about destruction through science. Then Prince of Darkness is about destruction through religion. And In the Mouth of Madness is destruction through art. And I think if I were going to perish in any of those ways, I would definitely perish in annihilation through art, because In the Mouth of Madness, if you read Sutter Kane's books, most especially his latest book, In the Mouth of Madness, you will completely go mad and you will have a break from reality, which is what we see happening in the movie. So I just had the best time reading this short little book. So if you're a fan of John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, I highly recommend picking up Devil's Advocate series, Michael Blythe's analysis of In the Mouth of Madness. So the next book I finished in June, and now we are into 5 stars, is In the House in the Dark of the Woods by Laird Hunt. I wrote an article about this book for Substack, so I will also link that article down in the description box below. This book sold me because it was described as David Lynch meets the Grimm brothers, and it fits that. So we have a woman who is in a dreamlike state, and she's in the woods, and she wants to pick berries to go back home and make a pie for her husband and son. But she continues to go further and further into the woods until she gets lost. And when she gets lost in the woods, she comes upon a house where a mysterious woman takes care of her. She also meets other mysterious women and a mysterious little girl in the woods, and has all of these bizarre experiences, and eventually has to make a decision whether she's going home or whether she's staying in the woods. It is a book about women's reclaiming their agency. It is a book about witchiness, and it is fascinating. It is like a fever dream, to use an overused term, but really it is. It's very surreal. There were times I really didn't know what was happening, but I was happy to be there and enjoying the ride. And like I said, I wrote extensively about it, so I will link that down below so you can read that if you're interested. And let me check Goodreads because I think I forgot a couple of things. I did. I forgot a couple of short stories that I read for Summer Spooks for E.D. Lewis. And the first one that I read was Nights in White Satins prompt from E.D. Lewis. And that book I chose, or short story, was The Voice in the Night. And this was written, let me look at my other notes, by William Hope Hodgson. And this is about a crew of men who hear, as you can imagine, a strange voice in the night, someone calling for help, but this person doesn't want the members of that other ship crew to get too close to them. So he says, just drop me down some food. We come to find out that he and his wife have been on this island starving. And something very strange is happening to their bodies. And that's all I can really say. Another prompt for Summer Spooks was Summer Loving. Technically, it was Summer Loving. And that was to read a book that feels like the season or a beach read. So I read The Flower. I knew I was going to have trouble saying this word. The Flowering of the Strange Orchid by H.G. Wells. It was fun. It's about a man who buys a strange orchid. It's actually an evil orchid, and it wants to take over people. I didn't mention my ratings. I gave A Voice in the Night 4 stars, and I gave The Strange Orchid 3 stars. So another prompt for E.D. Lewis's Summer Spooks was blockbusters, and that is to read a book that was inspired by a film or TV show, or actually I said that backwards, a book that inspired a film or TV show, or that should inspire one. So for that one, I chose Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This cover is gorgeous. I just got this physical copy. I am about 70% through the audiobook for Annihilation, and I am totally loving it. I decided to go ahead and get a physical copy though, because I plan to write a Substack article about Annihilation. So I needed, I was kept having to pause the audiobook so I could run and take notes. But Annihilation is about a group of 4 women. We have a narrator who is a biologist. Included in the group also are a psychologist, an anthropologist, and a surveyist or a surveyor. They are going into what is called Area X. And Area X is a very strange place. The previous expeditions that have gone to Area X have either disappeared, have all taken their own lives, all turned on one another and unalived each other, and then others came back, but they were very different from the people they were when they went in. And then eventually all of that crew ended up dying from cancer. So you may wonder why anybody goes to Area X, but you do find out, and I can't really say without spoiling something, you do find out why people go. I don't think it's a spoiler to say, I think it's pretty much at the beginning that the narrator has a strong connection to one of the people who previously went into Area X. But there's this very uncanny feeling. There are questions about whether something is an animal or a plant or more of a fungus, and it's hard to classify exactly what they're seeing. And it just gives you that very unsettled, uneasy feeling. There's this particular place in Area X that the narrator keeps calling a tower, even though it's mostly underground, when the others in the crew are calling it a tunnel. But in that tower or tunnel, they find strange cursive writing, and they're trying to determine like who wrote it and how they wrote it, because it's like this kind of fungal, this fungus that's actually what it's written with. It's just bizarre stuff. So I will be talking more about it when I finish it, and I can't wait to finish it. And when I do finish it, then I'll be able to fulfill the fourth prompt for Summer Spooks. And the fourth prompt is to feel the vibe, which is to watch a film or TV show that fits well with one of your reads. So right on the nose, I'm going to be watching Alex Garland's film adaptation of Annihilation. Again, I thought I would be finishing Annihilation in June, but life happens and I did not. And also because I'm on that kind of fungal, botanical, eco-gothic, and horror kick, I started reading Sarah Tatlinger's Cyanide Constellations and Other Stories. So this is a short story collection where a lot of the stories are connected to fungal or botanical horror or horror from the natural world. So I just want to share a little bit about the stories I've read so far. So far, I've read The Viridescent Dark, which is about a moon that ends up not being a typical type of moon as humans burn beneath us. So that story is about the clouds disappearing, related a lot to global warming, climate change, that type of horror. The Bones He Planted. This one is about grief and life and death. I know I'm being very vague, but these are very short stories. I've also read A Haunting of Lawn Ornaments, which is, that one's creepy, but it's kind of funny because literally like garden gnomes and flamingos come to life and have very sinister designs in mind for the humans in the neighborhood. Then we have Cyanide Constellations. I really liked that one. Again, I can't really say a lot about it, but I liked it. Then we have With Radium on Her Lips, which definitely harkens back to the very real Radium Girls and what happened to them. And then we have Avian Eyes, and that one is about birds and someone with a love for birds and maybe a sort of mingling of the two. So those are the stories I've read so far, but I will be getting back into that. So another book that I've started on a whim after watching the movie Undertone, which I do recommend. And this book is Sick Houses, Haunted Homes, and the Architecture of Dread by Layla Taylor. So clearly in this book, she is talking about what makes a house haunted, what's the difference between a house and a home. And she also talks about specific haunted houses in film. So I am enjoying this book so far. And then another book that I am in the middle of reading is Monster Theory Reading Culture. This is edited by Jeffrey Jerome Cohen. So Jeffrey Jerome Cohen wrote 7 Theses of Monsters, and that is the first essay in this book, and it is the only one I've read so far. But I did write a Substack article using the theory of the monster as harbinger of categorical crisis, and I wrote about the Bay from 2012 through that lens of monster as a categorical crisis. So I am enjoying this book too. Finally, I'm ready to get to the books that I will be reading in July. So the first one that I will be reading in July for my book club, the Literary Love Book Club, is What Hunger by Catherine Dang. And this book, I'll read it to you so we can get the synopsis. It's the summer before high school, and Ronnie finds herself too young for work, too old for cartoons. Her days are spent in a small backyard, dozing off to trashy magazines on a plastic lawn chair. In stark contrast stands her brother, Tommy, the pride and joy of their immigrant parents, a popular honor student destined to be the first in the family to attend college. The thought of Tommy leaving for school fills Ronnie with dread as she contemplates the quiet house she will be left alone in with her parents, May and Bob. Her parents rarely speak of their past in Vietnam except through the lens of food. The family's meals are a tapestry of cultural memory. Thick spring rolls with slim and salty nem chow. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I apologize. And steaming bowls of pho thai with thin, delicate slices of blood red beef. In the aftermath of the war, May and Ba taught Ronnie and Tommy that meat was a dangerous luxury, a symbol of survival that should never be taken for granted. But when tragedy strikes, Ronnie's world is upended and her sense of self and her understanding of her family are shattered. A few nights later, at Ronnie's first high school party, a boy crosses the line and she is overtaken by a force larger than herself. This newfound power comes with an insatiable hunger for raw meat, a craving that is both a saving grace and a potential destroyer. What Hunger is a visceral, emotional journey through the bursts and pitfalls of female rage. Ronnie's Vietnamese lineage and her mother's emotional memory play a crucial role in this tender ode to generational trauma and mother-daughter bonding. I can't wait. And the live show for What Hunger will take place on the second Sunday in August. So I have a book picked every other month and then the live show the following month so that everyone has plenty of time to finish the book. In case you don't quite finish What Hunger in July, you have a couple of weeks in June to get it done. And then the 2 books that I plan to read for Summerween, hosted by Gabby Reads, once I get my current reads finished. The first one I'm going to do is an audiobook for Tananarive Dew's The Wishing Pool. And these are short stories with themes of racism. And I believe they're all set in Gracetown, Florida, where she set stories in a previous collection, Ghost Summer. So I'm looking forward to reading anything by Tananarive Dew. She is one of my favorite authors. And the other book I plan to read for Summerween, I used 2 books to fit all the prompts. The other book is, what is? the other book. The Bell Chime by Mona Kabani, which has been sitting in my Kindle for a very long time. And this book is about a troubled young woman who lives in an apartment, and downstairs in the apartment lobby, she sees a missing poster with a very familiar face on it. And that's all I really know about the Bell Chime. So I don't want to know anymore because I want to go into it and just see and experience it for whatever it is. Okay. I know this was rambly. It's hot. I'm tired. I'm overwhelmed. If you hung in here to listen to all of my rambling, you have my deepest sympathies and my greatest appreciation. I would love to know what you've been reading, what you're planning to read. I would also love to know if you're going to join the Literary Love Book Club read for What Hunger. Thank you so much for watching. I would appreciate it if you hit the like, hit subscribe, hit that bell so we can keep on talking about all the books that we're reading or not reading. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and happy reading.